Today, we're looking into the world of Aram Khachaturian,
A Soviet Armenian composer and conductor.
quite the figure in music history.
Born in Tiflis, 1903, died in 78. He's got concertos, symphonies, ballets like Gayane and Spartacus.
And film scores?
Oh, and of course, who could forget the iconic Sabre Dance?
We've got quite the collection of sources here, so let's see what we uncover.
I think what's really interesting about Khachaturian is how he got to where he did. Coming to Moscow, no real musical training,
And then, making it in the Soviet Union's art scene.
all while mixing his Armenian heritage with Russian musical traditions. Quite the story. Maybe we should start with his early life, see where those influences come from.
So Tiflis, right?
Now, Tbilisi.
A real blend of cultures back then.
Some say he was actually born in Kajori.
A village nearby.
Yeah, but Khachaturian himself said he was born in Kajori.
Regardless, it was a melting pot. That and his Armenian family, it all played a part.
Absolutely. Speaking of family, his father, Yegia, had a bookbinding shop.
Bookbinding, huh?
Both parents, Yegia and Kumash, were Armenian, from villages near Ordubad. They actually had an arranged marriage before they even met.
Really?
Common back then. And Aram was the youngest of 5. They lived at 93 Uznadze Street in Tbilisi.
From 1906 to 1922. Imagine the stories those walls could tell.
It's amazing to think that he wasn't initially drawn to music at all.
Is that right? I thought he was always a musician at heart.
Well, he went to a commercial school in Tiflis, for merchants and such.
Makes sense, given the family business.
He even thought about becoming a doctor or an engineer. Music wasn't his first thought.
It makes his achievements even more impressive.
I wonder if the atmosphere of Tiflis played a part, even subconsciously.
I could see that. It was so diverse, musically speaking.
Armenian, Azerbaijani, Georgian, all those sounds swirling around. Khachaturian himself said that the vivid tunes of Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Georgian songs and dances that he heard as a boy determined my musical thinking, shaped my musical consciousness, and lay at the foundations of my artistic personality.
A powerful statement. He viewed those early experiences as the natural soil nourishing all my work.
Makes you think, doesn't it? And then there's the political context.
The Bolshevik Revolution.
1917. The whole Caucasus region changed.
Armenia by late 1920. Georgia in the spring of 21. Both part of the Soviet Union by December 1922.
And right in the middle of it all, this young man finding his musical voice.
Then comes the move to Moscow.
1921, he was 18, went to join his brother, Surin,
The one who is the stage director.
at the Moscow Art Theater, no less. Quite a change from Tiflis.
I bet. So was it music straight away for him in Moscow?
Well, in 1922, he enrolled at the Nessun Musical Institute.
Finally, the music education begins.
But at the same time, he was also studying biology at Moscow State University.
Really? Biology and music? Interesting combination.
It seems he had a wide range of interests. He began with cello under Sergei Bychkov.
And later, Andrei Borisak.
Exactly. But it wasn't until 1925 that he shifted to composition. Joined Mikhail Nessun's class at the Institute.
So this is where it really starts.
Even then, you could see his style emerging. The Dance Suite for Violin and Piano, 1926.
And the poem in C-sharp minor, 1927.
Already incorporating those Armenian folk elements. But he needed more formal training. 1929, he entered the Moscow Conservatory.
The big leagues.
Studied composition under Nikolai Myaskovsky, orchestration with Sergei Vasilenko.
2 giants of Soviet music.
Graduated in 1934, finished his postgraduate work in 1936, and then his first symphony, 1935, his graduation piece.
That was the one that caught everyone's attention.
Even Shostakovich was impressed. Talk about a stamp of approval.
It really put him on the map.
It did, and after his postgraduate work in 1936, he wrote his piano concerto.
His first major success.
People loved it, both in the Soviet Union and abroad.
It must have been quite a feeling. His career really started to take off.
Speaking of taking off, after the piano concerto, he really went deep into the concerto form.
The violin concerto, 1940, and the cello concerto in 46.
They're often seen as a kind of trilogy. He had such a grasp of what each instrument could do, and his music was both technically challenging and full of emotion.
The violin concerto was huge, wasn't it?
Premiered by David Oistrakh, no less, and it won him a Stalin Prize.
But he wasn't just composing. He took on more administrative roles, too.
Right, he became deputy chairman of the Moscow branch of the Composers Union in 1937.
And then deputy chairman of the organizing committee of the union from 1939 to 1948. Joined the Communist Party in 1943.
He was really embedded in the Soviet system.
And he used that position to promote good music.
Across all the Soviet republics. He believed in fostering talent, no matter where it came from.
A true believer in the power of music. And then there's that trip to Armenia in 1939.
6 months he spent there, immersed himself in the folk music. He actually called it his second conservatoire.
It's clear how deeply it affected him. It led to his first ballet, Happiness.
Composed that same year. And then came the war.
World War II, a tumultuous time.
But even then, he kept composing. He reworked Happiness into the Ballet Gayane.
1942. It premiered in Perm with the Kirov Ballet, a huge success.
Another Stalin Prize for him, first class this time. He donated it to build a Red Army tank.
Quite a gesture.
He also wrote his second symphony during the war, in 1943, for the 25th anniversary of the October Revolution, and there's the incidental music for Masquerade in 44, with that famous waltz.
Oh, and the anthem of the Armenian SSR was also written in 44.
Shostakovich even praised both Gayane and the Second Symphony.
Quite the accolades. But then, things took a turn. 1948.
The Denunciation, along with Prokofiev and Shostakovich and others.
He was labeled a formalist. His music called anti-people, all because of the symphonic poem.
Later known as the Third Symphony. The irony is, he wrote it for the anniversary of the October Revolution in 47.
How did that even happen? What did formalist even mean?
Well, back then in Soviet ideology, it meant music that was too focused on abstract ideas and complexity.
And not on being accessible to the people, or serving the state's interests.
Exactly. They saw it as ignoring folk traditions, leaning towards Western styles. Not good.
So there's this big conference in January 1948, this Dodanov conference.
And Tikhon Khrennikov, the new head of the Composers Union, starts criticizing Khachaturian's work.
Really laying into him.
Among others. And when Khachaturian says that composers might lose touch with popular taste, Andrei Zanov, a high-ranking party official, calls it extreme individualism.
A serious charge in those days. What was the real reason behind it all?
Well, some say it wasn't just the music itself. The musicologist Blair Johnston suggests it might have been because of Khachaturian's role in the Composers Union.
Like maybe they thought he was too lenient toward styles the authorities didn't like.
Perhaps. So how did Khachaturian respond?
He issued a very public apology in March of 48, admitted his artistic errors. But his music didn't really change.
No, it didn't. And he was sent to Armenia almost like a punishment.
Wow. But the interesting thing is that it didn't last long.
By December of 48, he was back in favor. They even praised him for his film score for Vladimir Ilyich Lenin.
Shows you how quickly things could change in the Soviet Union.
Absolutely. After that, things seemed to calm down a bit. He started focusing more on conducting.
And teaching.
Right? He taught composition at the Gnesin Institute.
And at the Moscow Conservatory.
And he always stressed the importance of folk music to his students. It was clearly something he held dear.
Passing on the torch.
Around that time, he also composed his ballet Spartacus.
The one he worked on from 1950 to 54.
And revised in 68. It was his last truly internationally acclaimed work. And in 54, he was named People's Artist of the Soviet Union.
Quite an honor.
A clear sign of official recognition. His later years were more about conducting and traveling.
Spreading his music around the world.
He toured in around 30 countries, both East and West. The Eastern Bloc, of course, but also Italy, Britain, Latin America.
Even the United States.
He visited there in 68, conducted the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington, D.C.
He was still involved in official duties, too.
President of the Soviet Association of Friendship and Cultural Cooperation with Latin American States, member of the Soviet Peace Committee, and secretary of the Composers Union from 57 until he passed away.
Quite a resume.
He even served as a deputy in the Supreme Soviet for a while. He didn't completely stop composing, though, did he?
Not at all. In the 1960s and 70s, he composed 3 concert rhapsodies for violin, cello, and piano, and solo sonatas for cello, violin, and viola.
He never lost his love for those instruments. He really left his mark, didn't he?
Absolutely. First, Armenian ballet, symphony, concerto, and film score. A true pioneer.
Considered the most renowned Armenian composer of the 20th century, a national treasure in Armenia.
His music was a real fusion of Russian and Armenian traditions.
Taking the best of both worlds and making it something truly unique.
So we've gone from his early days in Tiflis to becoming this celebrated Soviet composer, all while facing those periods of denunciation and political pressure.
It's a story of resilience, too.
Absolutely. He never abandoned his Armenian heritage. He wove it into his music no matter what.
And despite everything, his music endures. Those ballets, the concertos, the Sabre Dance, they still resonate with people all over the world.
It speaks to the power of his melodies, his rhythms, They transcend borders and ideologies.
It really makes you think about the role of those early influences, that time in Tiflis.
The natural soil that nourished his work.
How did that Armenian folk music, those vivid tunes and dances, shape his unique voice? How did it help him blend different musical worlds?
It's a fascinating question, and I think it's one that listeners can ponder as they explore Khachaturian's music for themselves.